You're good. Thank you, and thanks for the time. And to answer the question of why people have been seeing me in a sling for over a month now, just to let everyone know, it's nothing to do with my arm. I have a herniated disc that is expressing itself in my left arm. And so while I wait for a treatment, this is the most comfortable positioning for me. So everyone I talk to now says, what's going on with your arm? I see you on TV, you have this thing. But everything feels fine today, so it's all good. Well, so some of you heard some of what we had to say last year, and some folks are new. So what we want to do is kind of give you an update on a couple of the issues that we're focused on a lot this summer. In the summertime, we deal with our lakes especially, and our climate work continues. We're about to reach some exciting milestones. So I think I'll start with just kind of giving a quick overview of some of our lake work. Now, as you know, we kind of focus in two different areas, and they often overlap, when it comes to our lakes. First is for a number of years now, we've had partnerships with local farmers, local communities to reduce the amount of nutrients that run off during our rain events into our streams and into our lakes, mainly phosphorus, which produces algae. It's great algae feed. 1 pound of phosphorus equals about 500 pounds of algae. That's good if you want algae, but if you don't want algae, it's not so good. And so that's really the root of our problem that we have with our lakes as far as clean lakes. And so we, for a number of years, had all these great partnerships with our local farmers where we help them implement practices. We have matching grants, et cetera, that reduce runoff off of the fields and into the streams. We have partnerships with local municipalities to help them deal with their water that runs off from the yards and the streets. For example, there are hundreds of what we call stormwater outfalls, which means, as you probably know, when it rains in Dane County, we have our sanitary sewer, which is separate from our stormwater sewer. And the way the system is set up, it very efficiently takes everything that hits the ground and flushes it right into our lakes. Sounded like a good idea 100 years ago, not so much today, because not only does that put a whole bunch of water into the lakes all at once when we're looking at flooding, it also puts a lot of pollutants and nutrients directly into the lakes. And so on the urban side, we partner with municipalities and help them pay to replace those pipes with stormwater detention ponds so that that water goes into a big pond. You've probably seen them, you'd recognize them if you saw them. The sediment gets an opportunity to settle out, and then the cleaner water goes in, and it goes in at a slower pace too. So not only are there fewer nutrients, but there's less volume going too. And over the last few years, we've been implementing some newer programs with our farm families, the latest of which we call our continuous cover program. And what this is, we have a number of farmers in Dane County who would like to convert from row cropping to doing grazing, or to having some of their land in grass, or even land they're farming that they'd rather not, that they would like to have in prairie. And so we help them do that conversion with grants. And so once that land is converted to grazing or prairie, it's not as susceptible to having nutrients run off during these heavy rain events. It also, again, helps hold rain much better when it comes to flooding. One of the neatest experiences I had with this was a few years ago when we piloted this program, and the first farmer who took advantage of it was changing from row cropping to rotational grazing for his cattle. And I went out to his farm and we were visiting and looking at what he was doing. He said, "This is how my grandpa used to farm. I'm going back to the way my grandparents did it." And today his cattle are grazing, and it's just much better for our lakes. Again, much better for holding that water when it hits. The other piece that we have that I'm sure I mentioned last time is our Suck the Muck program. So what this is, this deals with, isn't that a great name? It sticks. We've been thinking about getting t-shirts. We're doing all this great work to keep sediment and phosphorus from going into the lakes. However, what we've found over the years is there's a whole bunch that's in there already, especially in the streams that feed into our chain of lakes. So you have all of this phosphorus, and sometimes this muck is up to 4, 5, 6 feet deep. It's been since, the 1800s, before there were better conservation practices in place for farming. And so that phosphorus is available to just wash into the lakes all the time. So we realized if we didn't deal with that, we weren't going to be able to address this algae problem. So for the last few years, we've been going in and sucking the muck with hydraulic dredging. We go into these streams, It's very efficient because we can get large quantities of this muck that's full of phosphorus out of the streams all at once. And it restores the natural habitat. It makes the streams, we go down to the sand and gravel bottom. We have better fish spawning habitat, wildlife habitat. And what we usually do is we find some county land. We've been fortunate, we've got county land adjacent to a number of our projects. And we pipe that muck into, for example, there was a place we did last year that had been an old aggregate mine that we wanted to reclaim. And so we pumped all that muck into there, dried it off, and that gave us the fill we needed. We covered it with topsoil, seeded it with prairie plants. And so that phosphorus isn't available to run off anymore when it rains now because it's protected by that ground cover. So we found a really nice ecological way to utilize that fill. The other dredging we have is similar but very different, and this relates to our flooding. And in a moment, we'll show this quick. It's about a 60-second video, I think, of where we're doing this now. So you think of our lakes, it's like 4 bathtubs connected by pipes, right? Lake Mendota at the top. Everything that goes into Lake Mendota, the only way out is through the chain of lakes on the other side of Lake Kuntz. You'll recall in 2018, when we had our flooding, the lakes backed up and kept backing up and kept backing up. As time went on. That's because all of the rain that hit not only went into the lakes, but then there's that stormwater system that I mentioned that delivers all that water right into the lakes. There's all of the water that hit all the streams that swelled over the next few days that kept going into the lakes. But those pipes, they're channels actually between the lakes that allow us to empty the lakes, empty the water out the other side, and then eventually down the Rock River. Over the decades, they've become clogged with a different type of sediment. It's mostly construction site runoff. They're full of sand and gravel. And so what we found is even though we opened up all the dams, opened up all the locks, we could not move the water out faster than it was coming in. Hence, we had that flooding. So we knew we had to do something structural. So we embarked on a dredging program through which we will go through the chain of lakes. We've begun already last year. This year, we're up across the street from Babcock Park in McFarland, and we are removing that sand sediment from in between the lakes so that we can move that water again when we get these rain events. And we've gone between Monona and Wabisa. We're on Wabisa now, and then we're going to go down Kaganza by Stoughton, the Stoughton area, because we want to make sure we get all the downstream channels open before we open up the channels from Lake Mendota, because you don't want to cause further flooding. And what's neat, and you'll see in this video, we're taking that fill that we find, we're taking it out and drying it. And because it's this pure sand, construction companies are able to reuse it in construction projects. And so you go out there now and you see the sand, and once it's dried, the big dump trucks are coming and picking it up, and they're using it to lay under projects they're using for roads and for parking lot that one of them is building now. So it's really nice to have it, kind of that closed loop. You take this stuff out and then you'll be able to reuse it once again. And Scott, why don't we play this quick video? This gives a little example of what it looks like now.
Oh, oopsie. I'm sorry.
Has anyone ever seen a presentation where the video worked right the first time? Doesn't happen.
I think he's muted. Is he muted?
Yeah, that's the question I have here. Hold yourself. There we go.
Turn up your volume.
Okay, so that's the dredging machine.
I'm sorry, John.
See, third time's a charm.
All right.
Well, if you don't get it this time, I'll just keep going. There we go.
Really
I'm getting. I think we just have to slide about this.
Okay, anyways, we've got a construction guy showing you the dredger and everything I just talked about. It's kind of a cool illustration of it. But So right here, no,
Oh, I'm sorry, Joe.
no, that's fine. Yeah, if we do this, this here, this is, so the 6 Mile, Dorn, Token Creek, York Creek, those are the suck the mucks. That's where we're taking the phosphorus sediment out. Here is where we're talking about opening up the channels to get the flood water out. That's where we did first. That's where we are right now, and there. As you see, we'll work our way back and ultimately open it up there. So none of this is really mandated or required, or we don't receive special funding for it unless we find a grant here or there. But this is work that we feel the community wants us to do. We have to do it as far as, public safety, keeping our lakes what they are, is a resource for all of us. And it's something that, we're pretty proud of the work that we're able to do. And hopefully, this work, especially for the flood prevention, can really help us as time goes on. And which I think I'll segue, let me know if I'm running up against time too, to our climate work. And so the question is, why does climate work? What does that have to do with flooding? Well, it turns out it has everything to do with flooding. So a number of years ago, a year or two after I got in office, which has been 11 years now, we partnered with the university to ask them, what are we going to see here locally regarding climate change? Because we all sure see on the evening news what's happening around the world. We see the forest fires out west, we see flooding, et cetera. One of the things we deal with in county government is a lot of people who are moving here from Central America who are climate migrants. Because climate change has impacted their local communities and their subsistence, their local farmers, et cetera, and their land is unfarmable anymore and they're being forced to move. We see this in a lot of places around the world. But as local government, we asked, what are the changes going to be right here? And what we were told is it's going to be warmer and wetter, more 90-degree+ days, more water, especially in the spring. And that rain is going to come all at once in these heavy, we hear the term 100-year rain events, and we're hearing that much more often. And that's sure what we experienced in 2018. That was a good illustration of what we're going to have to deal with. So in addition to looking at how we respond as a county doing this work, we looked at our emergency management, our human services department, our public health department. Virtually all of our departments will have different issues to deal with because of our changing climate. The highway department is installing bigger culverts now to help deal with that water, looking at how they design highway projects. Public health has to be aware now of different insect-borne diseases that we didn't have to deal with before. So we've built that into all of our contingency planning and just our basic work planning moving forward. And as we've seen, climate change is these changes have been coming a little faster than people had predicted. So it's a good thing we've been trying to get out ahead of this. So we've looked at, okay, we're doing the adaptation, we're doing all the planning we have to do. What can we do as far as our part for reducing our impact on the environment and reducing our CO2 and methane emissions? So what we started doing a number of years ago is, first of all, the best return on investment is energy efficiency. It usually pays for itself in 2 or 3 years, and then it's all gravy after that. We started investing a couple $1 million a year in every budget on energy efficiency in all of our county facilities, saving energy, saving taxpayer dollars. It's a great investment. Once we started pushing the envelope there, we started looking at renewables and what could we do with solar. We now have 17 solar arrays on various facilities in county government, including the one that you may have seen out at the airport, which is how many acres is that? Is it, I would never know how to explain to people because it's about 8 or 9 megawatts, which is a whole bunch of electricity. But you may see it's a giant, just to give you an example, it supplies about 40% of county government operations electricity. And what we did there is we found some land because we wanted to develop solar out at the airport because airports have to be surrounded by a lot of land. We reached out to MG&E, said, if you develop solar here, we'll buy it all from you. And we would like to pay less than we're paying now. And that's not that strange of a request because the cost of solar has gone down so much that it is now, solar and wind are the most affordable power you can build, much more affordable than coal-fired plants or nuclear or anything else. And so MG&E, it's a good deal for them because they have a guaranteed customer. They built it, so not a dollar out of taxpayers' pockets. As I said, it's now supplying 40% of our electricity, and we save over $100,000 a year on our electricity bill just from that one project. And I always like to talk about this to show people that it's not that old discussion that there used to be about, well, environment versus the economy. We're at a place right now where it's kind of fiscally irresponsible not to look at energy efficiency and renewables, because these are dollars that can be used for tax relief or for paying for services that we need to provide in a time where local government certainly isn't getting more money coming its way. Another neat thing and I should mention, yeah, I'll mention it here because I'm going to mention a couple other things that we're doing, but along the solar front, one of the exciting things that's happening is we are now in the process, we developed another partnership for another solar array that's twice as big as this one with Alliant Energy out at some land we have up by the county landfill. And that's being built as we speak. And once that's up and running, we will be offsetting 100% of the electricity that county government operations use with renewables. And we will be the first county government in the state of Wisconsin and one of only a few in the nation to have reached that milestone. So we're really excited about that. And we're really happy. And our next goal by 2030, our goal is to become carbon neutral. So there's the electricity we use, but we also use natural gas. We also have a lot of vehicles, et cetera. And so we want to be neutral in our operations when it comes to carbon or the equivalent of carbon. And the way we're doing that is through all the efficiency, all the renewables, plus at our landfill, and those of you who heard this before may recall this, as you may know, landfills generate methane gas, which is an extremely powerful greenhouse gas. Over 20 years, I believe it's about an 80 times as powerful as CO2. The good news about methane is it doesn't last as long, but it is much more powerful. So if we can reduce methane, that can really help us toward our short-term goals in addressing climate change while we work on CO2, which is a longer-term goal because it's in the atmosphere for so long. So a few years back, we invested close to $28 million at the landfill to build a first of its kind plant that takes the methane gas that our landfill generates, cleans it, scrubs it, compresses it, and turns it into compressed natural gas that's made out of rotting trash. It's all renewable that we use for transportation fuel. And we do two things with it. We fuel our vehicles now. We have over 100 county vehicles that run on RNG. We focused a lot on our big trucks, those big orange highway trucks get like 5 miles a gallon and run on diesel. Now over half of them run on CNG. And as we retire old ones, we turn them into CNG. It costs all of us taxpayers about $1.50 a gallon for that fuel. And if you know right now, diesel, I think is still up around $5 a gallon. So we're using the cleanest transportation fuel. We're not using diesel, and we're saving $3, $4, $5 a gallon. It's another win-win. Now we can't even use all of the fuel that we generate there. So we sell it into the natural gas pipeline, and it's purchased by Quick Trip, a local company. So we get the money that from selling that to Quick Trip, plus we also get carbon offset, something called renewable energy credits that people can purchase when they want to offset their carbon emissions. And we sell that on the open market. And so the money we're getting from that will pay for that plant we built in a few years. And after that, everything is gravy, a few $1 million a year for taxpayers in profit that we're getting from here. Again, it used to be, well, should we do this? Can we afford to? My position is we can't afford not to do this. So we're hoping that other communities, and we work hard at this, will see what we're doing and that they'll do the same things. And we have about 150 people a year who come and take a tour of this now. So we're really proud of this, really excited. How am I doing on time? How many more minutes should I take? Good? Okay. So you're getting the quick version here, as you can probably tell, but it's a lot of really cool stuff. The final piece, one of the final pieces of our goal to get to carbon neutrality. Okay, we offset, we use alternative fuels, we do all this good stuff, but that doesn't quite get us there. So we're focused on carbon sequestration through land restoration, prairie restoration, wetland restoration. And this again is where climate and our works to clean up our lakes intersect in a really positive way. I'll give you one example. We purchased a 160-acre plot of land a few years back in Middleton, adjacent to the Pheasant Branch Nature Preserve. That was a farm, had been for generations. They were selling it, and it was going to be developed as a residential units. It was already platted, et cetera. We looked at the numbers to see how much, I don't even remember off the top of my head, I don't know if you do know, how much the increase in runoff into the Lake Mendota right there through Pheasant Branch would be when we had heavy rains, and we were really concerned about flooding. We're also really concerned about the fact that it's right there where a spring comes up. And so as far as runoff of pollutants and nutrients into the water system. So we purchased it, and we are in the process of a multi-year conversion. We restored the wetlands, we're restoring it to prairie. This will help reduce nutrient runoff. This provides wonderful habitat and recreation space. It helps us as far as when it floods now, keep that water on the ground instead of rushing into the Pheasant Branch stream and into the lake. And it sequesters carbon. Prairie sequesters roughly the same amount of carbon as forest land, which sometimes people are surprised. They're very deep root systems. They put the carbon in the soil, and it stays there. It's great pollinator habitat. It's all good. So we look now when we do our recreational purchases, our land purchases to preserve, as far as the lakes go for nutrient runoff, we also look at how can we utilize that to sequester carbon. So that, along with our continuous cover program that I mentioned earlier, are two of our big programs for sequestering. The one other piece I'll mention, and then I'm going to two more quick, then I'll hand it over to Kathy. Is where was I going with this? Sustainable leaders, but there was one more thing the digesters. Okay, so another thing that we do to clean, that we started originally to help the lakes clean up. You may have heard of our manure digesters. We don't own them, but we help facilitate them. We brought businesses and farmers together to create these manure digesters because they take all the manure from the dairy farms. Each one has 3 or 4 farms that brings their manure there. Some truck it, some pipe it. It takes the manure, it removes the phosphorus, it puts it through an anaerobic digestion process, which creates natural gas. So that takes the methane out, because methane is produced by cow manure too, especially when it's just sitting in the lagoons that they use. And that's a very potent greenhouse gas. So not only are we taking removing the phosphorus, which means less algae, less lake pollution, we're able to take that gas. Now, the challenge for them was what to do with that gas, right? They used to burn it, as we did at the landfill, to generate electricity. But because wind and solar is so inexpensive now, the utilities didn't want to pay what it cost to generate it that way. So when we built our facility to convert natural gas, at the landfill, we built an offloading station so farmers could truck in their renewable natural gas from their digesters and feed it into the pipeline so they could get the same economic benefit that we are. And that helps make their digesters financially sustainable. So now they have a financially sustainable model. So it's some really cool stuff happening. I love the synergy that happens with all of this, with cleaning up the lakes, with saving money, with doing our part to address climate change, to address flooding. And then I'll turn it over to Kathy in 1 second, because where Kathy comes in on so many levels, she has to help make all this stuff happen and spread the word.
We got time for a couple questions.
Before Kathy?
No, none, just you.
It's okay.
Oh, you're not going to come up? Did I use them all the time?
It's good. You do.
I'm so sorry. So we created an Office of Energy and Climate Change to not only look inside, but to look outside to see what we can do to help local businesses and other units of government do the same kind of work. We have what we call a Sustainable Leaders Collaborative. As local school boards, local governments, everyone sharing how to do all this stuff. And there's just amazing work going on with local schools, local governments, doing renewables, saving their constituents money, a lot of good work with the business community. And Kathy's job is to all she has to do is like make all that happen in a county of 560,000 people. So I apologize for running over. We're still working on how to fit all this stuff in, because we can talk about this stuff forever. But
we have, you can go over a little bit.
did you want to do a little brief and then we can answer questions?
Can you go up?
She's the one who does all the real work.
Not true. It's the best to do this work where there's this much enthusiasm for the work. So just quickly, so everything the exec talked about was really fundamentally about our operations. Our office is really taking that to a community scale. And we started our process by convening a council on climate change. So the important thing to know about the council is everybody was represented there. This was a really diverse group, businesses, environmental groups, farmers, coming together to say, how do we make the best possible Dane County? This slide reflects something the exec talked about earlier. We had the university update the data for us. And, you know, living through this summer, you know, it's true. It's getting hotter and wetter here. These are our emissions, our county-wide emissions, when we sort of started the plan in 2016. So this is all of our homes, businesses, local governments. This is what we all together produced in terms of emissions. We turn it all into CO2 equivalents for a chart like this. The biggest piece is electricity, because in Wisconsin, we still get a lot of electricity from burning coal and natural gas. That piece is getting smaller every day. The two yellow-orange pieces next to that, commercial and residential, that's the natural gas we burn in our buildings to heat, space, and water. And then transportation is the next big piece kind of thing. So it gives you a sense of where we focus. To figure out our plan, we brought together experts on renewable energy, energy efficiency, land use, and those working groups came up with recommendations. Now, clearly, I'm not going to talk about 100+ recommendations. I'm going to give you a framework. When people like me talk about this, we talk about deep decarbonization, dramatically reducing the amount of carbon in our daily lives. And there's 3 big strategies. The first is eliminating waste, because whether we're talking about energy or water or food or fashion, anytime you take raw materials, process them, move them around the country, and then people throw them out, it's nothing short of crazy. So we have to stop doing that. Then we need to get our clean energy from clean energy sources like wind and solar and the RNG from the landfill and the manure digesters. And the last piece is converting our end uses to use that clean energy. In the next decade, you're going to hear a lot more about all electric buildings, in the same way you're starting to hear a lot about all electric cars. So we're going to transition that. The other piece that the exec talked about, you know, most climate action plans just focus on reducing emissions, but in Dane County, we can also increase natural carbon sequestration because we have natural lands, because we have tree canopies we can expand, we have prairies we can regrow. Everybody else doesn't have that. So we have an advantage over like Seattle or LA when they're writing their plan, because we've got those natural areas. When we do all of this, we can cut in half our countywide emissions by 2030, which is what the experts say. So we modeled this. It's not just we aspire to do this. We have a plan. We have a plan. So the sense you should have gotten from the exec is he really likes results. It's fine, I have a plan, but what he wants to see at the end of the day is stuff done, which I love. 3 big strategies in our office. We have to convince everyone they're part of this and they all have a role. Then I have to make it easy for people to do the right things, because they're not going to do stuff that's hard or complicated. We have to figure that out, and I'll give you a couple of examples. And we have to celebrate leadership, because leadership is contagious. You know this as Rotarians. You do all kinds of things that celebrate each other's leadership in a way that builds that leadership. You're like a terrific model for that. So making it easy. We have a website where we've got all kinds of stuff about things. I want to give you a couple of examples. One example about solar. So if today you were thinking about putting solar on your house, you might not know anybody who has solar. How do you find a vendor? How do you know what price is fair? We have this program Madison, the city started, that we worked with them to expand countywide. It's like a group buy. It's technical experts who will help you figure out what would fit on your house, what's a good price, here are some vendors they've vetted. It all makes that easier. So making it easier for you to do. On the business side, we think financing is a key thing. So as the exec said, efficiency pays off over time, but sometimes you don't have that money up front to pay for it. So property assessed clean energy financing is financing that can come through a local bank where the energy savings are bigger than the payments on the loan. So you're always to the green. You're saving more money than you're paying in the financing on a monthly basis. So now that barrier's gone. One more example, the exec mentioned this, the Sustainability Leaders Collaborative. So us bringing together cities, towns, villages, school districts to learn from each other, the pictures of folks learning from our fleet folks about those RNG vehicles, because they're more convinced when they learn from fleet folks than when they learn from folks like me who they know never drove a truck like that. Finally, a plug. So celebrating leadership. We have a climate champions program where every year we recognize entities who are leading on climate in one way or another. And our deadline this year is Friday of this week. And this is all about just celebrating the entities. We're going to have probably 30 additional businesses and local governments this year that we're celebrating. All of that to really mobilize folks around all of this. So see, I can do that fast.
So you got time for a couple quick questions?
Does anybody have questions? So when you were trying to facilitate all these different groups that you mentioned, which group did you encounter resistance from? The environmental groups and the farmers.
Do you have a thought on like, so I should disclose that I was in the office after the plan was down the road a certain way. I don't know in Dane County that there's anyone who's, I mean, people maybe have different senses of how fast we should go, but everyone, this is Dane County, 8 in 10 people are worried about climate change in most surveys in Dane County. So, you know, people aren't denying this. They're not sure they really need to act this year, maybe, you know, so it's more of that.
Yeah, and I think it's, you know, probably, I wouldn't express it as opposition either, but maybe initial concern from a lot of folks in the business community, because it's like, okay, what are you going to make me do now and how much is it going to cost me, right? Now, the thing about local government, we're not making anyone do anything. We can't make anyone do anything. That's our unique challenge. We have to demonstrate that it is beneficial. If I'm a business owner and I can get a PACE loan and I'm making widgets and my electric bill is $2,000 a month, and I'm not taking advantage of this program to cut my electric bill in half and still have a positive cash flow, the question doesn't become, again, why should I do this? It's like, why aren't you doing this? If I'm the board of directors, I mean, this is almost like going to a tax accountant and becoming tax efficient, right? It's like, you might as well light a dollar bill and throw the ashes out the window. You know, why do you want to do that with your money? Because another benefit of this work, of the efficiency work and the renewable work, is that these are dollars that are reinvested in the community. When we built that solar field, when MG&E built the solar field out at the airport, that was at the height of the pandemic when no one was working inside. And that project employed hundreds of local workers outside. So instead of taking that money and sending it out the window in flames, it took the dollars, invested them upfront in the community. Those workers had jobs, they reinvested those dollars. So I think that one of our challenges is, you know, letting business know that this is a smart business move. If you're going to go to a tax accountant, why are you not going to an energy consultant at the same time? Because you can save a lot of dollars and your clients and your customers want you to be green. So there's a great PR benefit as well. And people should be complimented when they do that.
When you talked about buying up farmland that was scheduled to be developed,
Yeah.
I'm assuming there's a big cost difference between the return for the farmer who's selling that and his family, his heirs, and turning it into a prairie. How do you convince a farmer that he should sell it to you guys because it's the right thing to do?
We pay market rate. And some, there are some times when we'll negotiate when a farm family or a property owner will say, you know what? As part of my legacy, I don't want to see this developed. And there's nothing wrong with development. I mean, I'm not saying, I mean, we definitely need more housing, we need economic development, but it's like, where do we want to do it and how do we want to do it? So in some cases, we might get a break or a good deal or a partial donation. In other cases, we have to pay what they're asking. And, you know, for example, with this project, I've always said, in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, I guarantee you not a soul is going to go to the Pheasant Branch Nature Preserve, look at that 160 acres of prairie and wetland and say, boy, I wish this was a residential development. You know? So we have to make the judgment call on each time. Is this a good investment for future generations? And, you know, I think everyone, I mean, you don't belong in the Rotary because you're selfish people, right? I mean, you do this not for yourselves, for future generations. And that's how we look at our work with climate. It's like planting oak trees, right? You don't do it for yourself. You do it for your kids, your grandkids, and their kids. And I truly believe passionately, as I know, you know, as I know all of us do, who Kathy and everyone who work in this work, that we are at a critical juncture in our world history right now. And I can't look my 20-something girls in the eyes and not be doing something about this. Because what am I going to say to them if hopefully I'm still around in 30, 40 years? They say, how did you allow this to happen? Because that generation's already looking at us and asking that. They're like, what? You guys saw this coming, and now this is the world that these young people are going to have to live on for the next 50, 60, 70 years. And this is the ultimate act locally, think globally, act locally. And that's the good news, is you can make such a difference in people's lives by doing the right thing for the environment and for climate change. And it's really not a sacrifice. It makes good business sense.
So my friend.
Well, thank you to Joe and to Kathy and also to Scott for being here today. Rotary makes a contribution for all our speakers to Rotary International's End Polio Plus Fund. You will do the same for you as well. Our speaker next week is Julie Musilli from Habitat for Humanity. She'll be here to talk to us about opportunities and an overview with Habitat for Humanity. Thank you for being present in person and on Zoom. And remember, service above self. Have a great week.